The second round is now over in the Eastern Conference, and boy, was it an entertaining one. The Miami Heat shocked everyone and nearly swept the best team in the NBA as they disrupted Milwaukee's offense and shut down the back-to-back MVP. After a slight scare in games 3 and 4, Boston bounced back and bounced out Toronto in 7 games. Moving on now to the big dance of the East. So, who wins this new series? The Boston Celtics or the Miami Heat? In today's video, I will be taking a look at the conference finals matchup for the Boston Celtics and Miami Heat and predicting the series, the team's strengths and weaknesses, the players who need to step up, the key to success, every little detail. Before we start, if you're new here and enjoy the video, be sure to subscribe for more NBA content like this. I'm trying to hit 15,000 subscribers by the end of the year, so all support would be greatly appreciated. Anyway, with that all being said, let's take a look at this conference finals matchup. After an intense 7-game battle, the Boston Celtics have come out on top against the reigning champions and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. For the most part, the Celtics seemed to be by far the better team last round, so I think it's fair to say they deserve a spot in the conference finals. Kemba Walker showed his legitimacy as one of the league's top guards for the majority of last series, as well as Jayson Tatum unleashing his potential to the league. Overall, I think the Celtics should be thanking their lucky stars Miami moved on instead of Milwaukee, as that would have been a horrible matchup for them, but I'll talk more about that later on. Boston were just great in round 2, and now we'll just have to wait and see if they can continue that into the next round against the red-hot Miami Heat. The Miami Heat were, to put it lightly, phenomenal versus the Milwaukee Bucks. Coming into that series, there was a few ideas that they could win, but to win in the fashion they did is just unreal. They locked up Giannis Antetokounmpo and simply disrupted the Bucks' offensive scheme. They also made them pay on defense too, lighting them up from beyond the arc. Every player on Miami's roster was huge this series and all played a massive part in the win. It was a huge team effort, but there's 3 guys who stood out to me this series. Jimmy Butler was insane, dropping 40 points in a pivotal game 1, as well as clutching up in game 2 as he casually sunk the winning free throws after the siren. Over the entire series, Butler shot 53% from the field and 45% from 3, which is a 21% increase from his regular season average. Tyler Herro and Goran Dragic were also amazing. Herro was clutch and consistent, and Dragic continues to pour on an efficient 20 points every single game, and for some reason, gets minimal recognition for it. He's just been great. Overall, the Heat played out of their mind in round 2. I really could go on forever about it. They thoroughly deserve to be in the conference finals. By the way, they are the first 5th-seeded team to make it since Memphis didn't back in 2013, which proves to me just how legit they are. With that all being said though, what are the strengths and weaknesses of Miami and Boston? And how will it benefit or disadvantage them this series? Let's look at Boston's strengths first. The first big strength of Boston is their defense. Boston is 2nd in the NBA for points allowed per game and 1st in the NBA for points allowed per game in the playoffs. This is thanks to guys like Marcus Smart committing themselves heavily on that end of the court. If they can minimize the impact of Miami stars, this series could be over relatively quickly, in my opinion. Another big strength of the Celtics is their depth. Boston is renowned for having one of the best benches in the NBA, and if you look at it, they're honestly stacked. There are multiple players on their squad that would be legitimate starters on other teams, and against Miami, this is going to be crucial. Miami are also a very deep, talented squad, so Boston's bench players and their level of play will make a huge impact on this series. So those are the strengths of the Celtics. What are their weaknesses? The biggest weakness I can think of for the Celtics is their inconsistency at times. Now I won't lie, I haven't watched a lot of Celtics games this year, but I did watch the majority of their playoff games. And though the inconsistency from guys like Kemba Walker and Tatum hasn't hurt them too much, I don't think they can allow themselves to have an off game against a team like Miami. Let me know any weaknesses you have for the Celtics below. This is really the only obvious one I can think of, but if Tatum, Kemba, etc. don't step up consistently next series, we may see another cruisy series win by Miami. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of the Boston Celtics. Now, let's take a look at the Miami Heat. A big strength of the Miami Heat has to be their three-point shooting. The Heat are a top 3 team in the NBA for three-point shooting percentage, and this is thanks to guys like Duncan Robinson, Tyler Herro, etc. shooting lights out throughout this season. In round 2, the Heat's three-point shooting was obviously a big contributor to their success. Against the Celtics, I don't think they will need to rely on it as much, but it's definitely a strength for them nonetheless that Boston will need to plan for. Another strength of Miami's is their team chemistry. The reason why the Heat are so good this season is because they mesh so well together. This team has probably the best chemistry out of any team in the league, and though that is hard to measure, you can just see it when they're out there. I think this is in large thanks to Jimmy Butler, whose work ethic and leadership has inspired this otherwise mediocre team, and now with their friendly banter, competitiveness, and most importantly, respect for each other, they've become a very cohesive team. Last series versus Milwaukee, this was seen many times, and I think the passion they all show allowed them to close out important games. In high pressure situations, team chemistry is very important, which is why I have it as a strength for Miami today. So those are the strengths of the Miami Heat. But what are their weaknesses? The biggest weakness I can think of for the Miami Heat is their transition offense and overall fast break scoring. Due to their slow pace, the Heat are one of the worst teams in the NBA at running the fast break, and that's seen with their bottom 5 fast break points per game. I'm not sure if this will have too big of an impact on them this series, we'll have to wait and see, but this is definitely an issue for the Heat nonetheless. So those are the strengths and weaknesses of both teams. Now, let's take a look at a player or two from each team that needs to step up this series in order for their team to have the best chance at winning. We'll start with the Celtics. The player that really needs to step up for Boston is Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker was extremely inconsistent last series, and though it didn't matter all too much in the end, he needs to step it up against Miami. Having some mediocre shooting performances, barely scoring in the double digits some games, the Celtics just can't afford him to play like that. We know he can step up. We saw it in Game 3 where he dropped nearly 30 points, but his 2 for 11 and 5 for 16 performances that he had in Games 6 and 7 just can't happen again. I'm not too worried about this, to be completely honest, but if we're being realistic, this just can't happen against Miami. Boston and Kemba will be punished for it. So for that reason, Kemba Walker needs to step up. The players that need to step up for Miami are the role players, so guys like Jay Crowder, Andre Iguodala, etc. If we're being honest here, there's no one on Miami that needs to step up. They all played at the best possible level last series, and there's honestly no players I can think of that played consistently bad for them last round. The reason why I'm saying Miami needs its role players to step up is because Boston have a very deep roster. The Celtics have one of the best benches in the NBA and have so many weapons they can go to on offense and plenty of guys that can step up and make huge defensive plays. So it's going to be critical for Miami to match that or outplay the output from those guys. Though Boston have the stars in Tatum, Kemba, and Brown, they are also packed with exceptional role players, and that's what makes them such a deadly team. Again, if Miami match this output and their role players play at a high level, then I find it difficult to see them losing this series. If they have to rely consistently on their stars though and force them to make the majority of the plays, it could well be a different story. Miami really relies on their very even spread of offense to succeed, so the bench will have to play a large part for them in this series if they wish to win. The key to success for Boston is Jayson Tatum. The reason why I say this is because the Celtics will only go as far as Tatum takes them. I don't think Tatum was bad at all last round. He was fantastic for the most part, but it's obvious his play determines the outcome for Boston most games. For example, in Game 6, he had a pretty poor game, finishing the game with 6 turnovers, 3 of those occurring down the stretch of regulation and overtime, and the Raptors took that game in amazing fashion. Then today, in Game 7, Tatum was ridiculously good, dropping a near 30 points and securing the win with a huge offensive rebound over 3 Raptors players. I don't want to get too mathematical on you all, but Tatum is generally the explanatory value for the Celtics' response, and it's why I think if the Celtics want to win this series, Tatum needs to play at the level he played at in Game 7. Again, he is the guy that leads the Celtics to success. The key to success for Miami is their offense. As I mentioned earlier, Boston have some exceptional perimeter defenders and are overall a fantastic defensive team. If Miami can't get going offensively, if guys like Butler, Dragic, Robinson, etc. don't get their shots falling, it may be a tough series for them. I think they can overcome it, we'll have to wait and see, but the Heat need to have some exceptional offense this series to have the best possible chance of winning it. So with that all being said, after looking at each team's strengths and weaknesses, the players who need to step up, the keys to success, who is winning this series in my opinion? Boston or Miami? I'm going to have to go with the Boston Celtics in 7 games, and here is why. To me, the Celtics just match up so well with Miami, and I think the Heat's offensive production won't be enough to overcome the Celtics' defensive production. If the Miami Heat can get their off-ball guys going, like Duncan Robinson and Tyler Herro, then they will be hard to stop, but I think Boston can stop them at the start with their perimeter guys. I'm expecting Butler to definitely struggle a fair bit more offensively than he has. He will play well, but definitely not on the level he's been at. Don't expect the 50% 3-point shooting to continue. If Miami can slow down the pace a lot, like they did against Milwaukee, then they may have a great shot at winning this. But I think Boston are a lot better off for a half-court pace than Milwaukee, making things a lot tougher for the Heat. Don't get me wrong here though, it's very close. I think Miami are equally as likely to win this series, which is why I have this going to 7, but I am leaning towards Boston today, just because I think they can match the Heat's offensive output and disrupt them defensively better than the Heat will disrupt them. So overall, due to Boston's elite defense, great scorers, and ability to match up with Miami so well, I have them winning the Eastern Conference Finals in 7 games. And that will conclude the video. What do you guys think of this? Who do you have winning this series? The Celtics or the Heat? And in how many games? Let me know all your thoughts on this down in the comments below. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to drop it a like and subscribe. But with that being said, I am out. Peace.